Hello and welcome to Uzreport World News. My name is Barnona Zarzoda. Ant Engineering, one of the largest EPC contractors in Uzbekistan, has announced that the DTL project is 95% complete. A $3.6 billion project was considered as the country's ambitious energy strategy. Ant Engineering said that some 10,000 tons of steel structures were installed at the plant over the past year. 1.94 million meters of cables were laid. Over 12,000 specialists and 800 pieces of equipment were involved at the peak of activity. USDL is one of the largest investment projects not only in Uzbekistan but also in the entire region. It aims at expanding the country's capacity for deep processing of natural gas, radically reducing the import of hydrocarbon raw materials. Petroleum products delivered by the project are to substitute $1 billion worth of imports annually. The Uzbek capital Tashkent is planning to implement nearly 1,400 investment projects worth $10.7 billion by 2024. Marifat Abdusharipova has more.
By the end of this year, the government intends to raise $4.1 billion worth of investments. Some 130 projects worth $171 million are to be commissioned in the first quarter. Nearly 847 projects worth over $2.8 billion scheduled for completion in the current year are to create about 36,000 new jobs. Tashkent enterprises plan to export goods worth $3 billion in 2021-2023. This year, they expect to export $70 million worth of fruit and vegetable products, as well as industrial goods amounting to $800 million.
Uzbekistan has risen to 67th place in Statistical Potential Index according to the updated World Development Report for 2021. The statistical potential of the country characterizes its ability to collect, analyze and disseminate reliable data on its population and economy.
Since 2016, Uzbekistan has climbed 66 positions in the index. The report focuses on how data can improve the lives of poor people and help achieve development goals. According to the UNDP resident representative in Uzbekistan, Matilda Dimovskaya, this significant achievement is largely due to the web portal, which was developed by the State Committee on Statistics and UNDP. The National SDGs web portal, launched in 2019, offers statistics complemented by the national news, reports, and legislation related to progress towards the SDGs, as well as the 2030 agenda.
The Uzbek government has initiated a fund for those who are suffering from oncohematological and intractable diseases. The fund includes involving foreign specialists to conduct complex surgeries in the Republic. The funds are also planned to be used to purchase the necessary equipment, medicines and medical devices, as well as to reimburse patients for the costs of diagnostics and medical care. The fund's activities are to gain income from the placement of its free funds on bank deposits and 7% of the excise tax on tobacco products. In addition, individuals and legal entities are also welcome to make donations. Uzbekistan and Russia intend to cooperate in space projects. The new Russian ambassador to Uzbekistan, Oleg Malginov, on Monday met with the Uzbek Foreign Minister Abdulaziz Kamilov at the ceremony of laying flowers to Yuri Gagarin in Tashkent. The treaty is to be signed upon the visit of Uzbek president to Moscow. Malginov said that the countries should continue the construction of the joint radio astronomy observatory SAFA in the Jizak region, which was suspended due to lack of financial resources since 2005. The observatory is expected to be equipped with the largest RT-70 radio telescope, which will make it possible to carry out unique scientific research, including the space communications. Experts unveil details of the ZF-UZ-VAC 2001 COVID-19 vaccine. According to Uzbekistan's Ministry of Innovative Development, the medicament is a vaccine with an adjuvant of the COVID-19 protein subunit, jointly developed by the AHJFA Longcom Biopharmaceutical, the Institute of Microbiology of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and the Republic's Center of Advanced Technologies.
As the clinical trials of the jointly developed vaccine have been carried out in Uzbekistan, the Republic is now recognized as a co-author of the jab. To develop it, researchers applied a technology similar to the one aimed to produce other recombinant vaccines. The vaccine was obtained biotechnologically by creating a recombinant protein, ncp-RBD coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. In response to this protein, the immune system produces antibodies to neutralize the virus. This vaccine is given in 3 doses over 2 months. The jab is made from a purified receptor binding section of the coronavirus spike glycoprotein expressed by the recombinant CHO cells and the addition of an aluminum hydroxide adjuvant.
Embassy of Uzbekistan in Jakarta premiered The Light from the East documentary directed by Shuhrat Mahmudov, depicting the life of Abu Ali ibn Sina. The film was translated into Indonesian language by the Antara news agency.
Muhammad Sharif Bando, the director of the National Library of Indonesia, in his remarks said that Ibn Sina was a phenomenal figure in science and the father of modern medicine. His most famous works, such as Book of Healing, a philosophical and scientific encyclopedia, and the Canon of Medicine, a medical encyclopedia, still serve as a roadmap in modern medicine. Some of the author's most prominent works are available in the library collection. At the end of the event, guests were able to participate in a quiz competition dedicated to the life and works of Abu Ali ibn Sina. The winners were granted valuable prizes from the Uzbek embassy staff.
Africa must expand vaccine manufacturing to combat COVID-19 and future health emergencies. That message came from continental leaders and international health experts at a virtual meeting on Monday. Among them, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
We must strengthen our ability.
He said the continent's existing capabilities needed to be grown to create regional hubs that serve the continent as a whole.
Africa's response has shown the depth of scientific expertise on the continent and has provided an opportunity for unprecedented scientific collaboration.
He added that countries could seek guidance from nations like India and Brazil on how they developed their generic pharmaceutical industries. Africa has struggled to acquire coronavirus vaccines and imports the vast majority of its medical supplies and equipment. That leaves it at the mercy of overseas supplies, as shown when India recently temporarily suspended exports of coronavirus vaccines. The continent has fallen behind in the global vaccination race, the Africa CDC said last week, with under 13 million doses administered to a population of 1.3 billion. World Trade Organization Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala said that was a rate of 1.1 per 100 people, compared to more than 40 per 100 in North America.
This is morally unconscionable and a serious economic hit.
She said building more manufacturing capacity would require long-term investments, but countries could offer incentives such as cutting tariffs on raw materials. John Nkengasong, head of the Africa CDC, said the continent now imports 99% of all its vaccines, but should aim to reduce that to around 40% by 2040.
Body camera footage was released at a news briefing Monday of the fatal police shooting of 20-year-old Dante Wright, a black man in a Minneapolis suburb, which according to police appeared to be an accidental discharge by an officer who drew her gun instead of her taser during a struggle. Brooklyn Center Police Chief Tim Gannon.
The officer, while struggling with Mr. Wright, shouts, "Taser, taser," several times. That is part of the officer's training prior to deploying a taser, which is a less lethal device. During this encounter, however, the officer drew their handgun instead of their taser. This appears to me, from what I've viewed and the officer's reaction and distress immediately after, that this was an accidental discharge that resulted in the tragic death of Mr. Wright.
The shooting on Sunday triggered unrest in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, with police firing tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse angry protesters who kept to the streets into the early Monday morning hours. The botched arrest of Wright, who police say was stopped due to an expired car registration, occurred not far from where the trial of Derek Chauvin, the former white Minneapolis police officer charged with murdering George Floyd, is taking place. Brooklyn Center Police Chief said the routine traffic stop escalated into a deadly shooting when officers ran a check on Wright and found an outstanding warrant for him. Video footage presented at the briefing showed an officer trying to handcuff Wright next to the car before he breaks free and gets back inside the car. Then he is shot. At the news conference, Brooklyn Park Mayor Mike Elliott said the officer, who has been placed on administrative leave and whose identity has not been disclosed, should be fired.
My position is that we cannot afford to make mistakes that lead to the loss of life of other people in our profession.
U.S. President Joe Biden called the killing tragic, but said there was no justification for violence and called on the protesters to be peaceful.
There could be a new treatment in the fight against COVID. Regeneron said on Monday that it's pursuing U.S. approval for its COVID-19 antibody cocktail as a preventative treatment after it helped cut the risk of symptomatic infections in households where someone else is ill. According to trial data released by the company, the drug protected household contacts exposed to COVID from ever developing symptoms in a majority of the cases, with 72% protection against symptomatic infections in the first week and 93% after that. Regeneron has enlisted Switzerland's Roche and its massive biotech facility in South San Francisco to make around 2 million doses annually. The cocktail already has emergency U.S. approval for patients with mild to moderate COVID, and the companies are hoping the latest trials convince regulators to expand deployment. Medical experts say it could be useful to control outbreaks in high-risk settings where people haven't been vaccinated.
These vials of COVID-19 vaccines are being packed up in a facility in Fairbanks, Alaska. As far as they've come, they've got further to go. These doses are set for the small town of Eagle, a one-time gold rush outpost on the Yukon River near the Canadian border. Despite its remote geography and often inhospitable climate, Alaska ranks among the top U.S. states for getting COVID-19 vaccines into the arms of its residents. By early April, more than 42% of those aged 16 and older had received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, one of the highest rates of inoculation per capita. A large part of that success story is due to efforts by the native population, who used their federally recognized sovereign powers to obtain doses from the U.S. Indian Health Service. Karma Ulvi is the first chief of Eagle Village and a community health aide.
Eagle has roughly about 120 people or so, and we've been able to get about 85 vaccinated. So pretty much the entire community has been vaccinated, and that is really nice for all of us, just since we're so remote out here.
The need is particularly important here. With limited phone and internet service and no wintertime road access, the nearest hospital is at least 3 hours away by aircraft.
We're getting like 60% of our food from subsistence, being fishing, gardening.
Sonia Sager is an Eagle resident who says that even a community that prides itself on self-sufficiency is grateful for the help.
That is in itself very valuable. It's valuable to us, but it's also just valuable to society to have people that can take care of themselves, but we cannot give ourselves the shot. So we are very, very grateful.
Alaska natives imposed some of the nation's earliest and most robust lockdowns and mask mandates to curb the pandemic, but the virus reached the rural sites nonetheless, with devastating results. According to the state epidemiology office, indigenous people accounted for 37% of Alaska's COVID-19 deaths last year, more than twice their proportion of the population. State data show in some extremely remote native villages, vaccination rates are now approaching 90%.
Sir, could you please, for the jury, describe George Floyd's relationship with his mother?
Oh, it was one of a kind.
George Floyd stood out among his siblings for the way he adored his mother. His younger brother, Philonise Floyd, testified on Monday in the murder trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Due to be one of the last prosecution witnesses, Philonise was called under a Minnesota doctrine that lets loved ones reminisce about a crime victim in what is called spark of life testimony.
George, he would always be up on our mom. He was a big mama's boy. He would lay up on her in the fetus position like he was still in a womb.
Philonise was also used by the prosecution to undermine an argument made by Chauvin's lawyers that when George is heard in body cam footage telling police he was, quote, just hooping earlier, he was referring to drug use. Prosecutors set out to show that that was strictly basketball talk for Floyd, who once played on a community college basketball team in Florida.
And when he would talk about playing basketball, would he use any particular term or phrase?
Oh, he said, hey, man, let's go hooping. And we will always say, come on, let's go. We always went hooping.
I believe that Mr. George Floyd's death was absolutely preventable.
Earlier in the day, Dr. Jonathan Rich, a cardiologist and medical school professor at Northwestern University, testified that there were several moments when Chauvin could have intervened to save Floyd's life. Rich echoed testimony from other medical experts supporting the conclusion by the Hennepin County Chief Medical Examiner that Floyd's death was a homicide at the hands of police.
After reviewing all of the facts and evidence of the case, I can state with a high degree of medical certainty that George Floyd did not die from a primary cardiac event, and he did not die from a drug overdose.
Judge Peter Cahill also denied a request by Chauvin's lawyer to sequester the jury in light of the fatal police shooting a day earlier of a black man named Dante Wright in a traffic stop in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, which the city's police chief called accidental. The judge said he would sequester jurors, however, once they begin deliberations in the Chauvin case.
A minor pullback on Wall Street Monday as investors took a rest after the Dow and the S&P 500 hit record highs last week. The Dow shed 55 points. The S&P 500 was basically flat. The Nasdaq lost 50 points. Investors are moving with caution with earnings season set to begin, says Blueprint Capital Advisors CEO Jacob Waltauer.
I think you're seeing selling pressure on the market simply because investors are concerned about whether or not earnings will come in ahead of these revised estimates that have been set by Wall Street analysts. And let's face it, the market has run a significant distance in a very short period of time. And so people are getting a little bit nervous and they're wondering kind of what's next in this market.
There was a lot of corporate news to trade off of. Sources told Reuters exclusively that GameStop is looking to replace current CEO George Sherman, and the board is already working with an executive headhunter on the CEO search. GameStop is trying to transform itself from a struggling brick-and-mortar retailer into an e-commerce outfit. A GameStop spokesman declined to comment. Shares fell roughly 11%. A warning from United Airlines. The air carrier said it expects first quarter revenues to show a plunge of 66%, which is near the lower end of its prior forecast. Shares of United down 4%. A summit at the White House focused on semiconductors. President Biden wants to revise domestic semiconductor manufacturing amidst a global chip shortage that's hurting production across several industries. And Microsoft offered to buy artificial intelligence and speak technology company Nuance Communications for nearly $20 billion. Shares of Microsoft touched an all-time high. Nuance surged to a record high as well.
Jack Ma's Ant Group, which owns China's largest digital payment platform Alipay and is an affiliate of e-commerce giant Alibaba, announced on Monday that it will undergo a sweeping restructuring on the order of the Chinese government. The crackdown on Ant Group underscores Beijing's determination to rein in big tech. Chinese regulators had already derailed Ant Group's record $37 billion IPO in November, and just 2 days ago, Jack Ma's Alibaba Group was hit with a record $2.75 billion antitrust fine as China tightens controls on the booming platform economy. The overhaul of Ant Group includes turning itself into a financial holding firm, a move expected to curb its profitability and valuation by cutting back on some of its freewheeling businesses. Ant will also be subjected to tougher regulatory oversight and capital requirements and will be forced to cut links between its hugely popular payments app Alipay and its other businesses, which had been viewed as a big advantage due to Alipay's vast trove of customer data with more than 730 million monthly users in China. U.S.-listed shares of Alibaba were up 8% after Monday's announcement, tracking a similar gain for its Hong Kong shares earlier in the day, with investors cheering the end of uncertainty for the e-commerce giant after the antitrust fine.
And this was our last report. Thank you for watching and goodbye.